Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Matters Thursday here at the Daily Huddle. I am your host, Dr. Monikah Ogando, and I have a doozy for you. Why don't I have a doozy? Do we ever not have a doozy? Aren't we like doozy central up in here? So today we're going to be talking about what does the occult mean, and especially around your spiritual journey. And so I have a quote, one of my favorites that I think you'll find useful as well, which is a quote from Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychologists who also speaks into spirituality. He says, if you do not make the unconscious conscious, you will be driven by it and call it fate. If you do not make the unconscious conscious, you will be driven by it and call it fate. Woo! That just sends chills down my spine. We're going to talk about it today when we talk about what does the occult mean and how do you practice it. Welcome to the Daily Huddle. Okay, all right. We are getting juicy conversation going today. And so in order to be equipped and grounded to be able to manage this level of juiciness, we have some questions. Andrea, where are you and what are you thankful for?
I am right where I need to be, which is right here. And I'm thankful for women. I've been inspired by Tara and Catherine since our weekend together. So I'm inspired by women.
I love it. Yay! Tara is one of my favorite people also. She's the inspiration behind the short hair. I don't know if you knew that, but she is. Speaking of, Tara, what time is it? And who are you going to hug today?
Let's see what time is it. It is only time that matters. And I'm going to give a big fat virtual hug to Andrea.
Yay! I love those hugs.
I didn't finish the sentence. The time is now.
Yes, the time is now. Absolutely. I love it. Well, so today we're talking about what does occult mean and how do you practice it? And I'm going to assume, you know how we love to audit our assumptions. Doesn't mean that we don't have them. It just means that we're aware of them. And I'm going to make an assumption that in this culture, we tend to associate the occult with something bad or evil, or you're not supposed to do that. The term occult generally refers to practices or beliefs that involve supernatural or physical or mystical, I should say, phenomena. And it's often associated with the esoteric or the hidden knowledge of various spiritual religious traditions. The word occult itself comes from the Latin occultus, which means hidden or secret. And there are many different types of occult practices, spiritually and otherwise. To give you a really basic example, a real basic example of the ways in which you already have occult practices in your life. You go to the bathroom by yourself. You don't show that to nobody. That's an occult practice. I know I'm getting real banal, but I just want to give you some evidence that you already have occult practices in your life. Some of us, for example, when we were dating our partners, for me anyways, okay, I can't speak for all women, but there's this cultural thing that it's like, you're supposed to be prim and proper, etc. Do you know that it took me like 6 months of dating my now husband before I would even become flatulent in front of him? I was so self-conscious about it. I was like, no, we're not farting in front of this man. We're just not gonna do it. So that was one of my occult practices. Welcome. Welcome to TMI land. Welcome. And so, we have occult practices already in our physical life, in our emotional life. There are pieces of us that we do not share with everybody, or at least we share this with certain people, but not that. There's a way that you are in a corporate professional environment, and there's a way that you are in a creative, artistic environment, and there's the way that you are with family and so forth. There are pieces of you that are not available to everybody. So you are already a practitioner of the occult. And when we impute certain meaning into something like that's bad and this is evil and this is et cetera, what we're doing is saying, I am not willing to go there. And so I just want to present some of that because there might be some lessons there. There might be some opportunity for learning or for creative self-expression that you had not considered because of the implications, right? So from a spiritual perspective, there are many different types of occult practices. For example, divination, whether that's tarot reading or astrology. There's also rituals, ceremonial magic, or just rituals that mark transitions, sometimes seasonal and so forth. Alchemy, various forms of spiritual or intuitive development. So it's important to note that the occult is often viewed as controversial or maybe even potentially dangerous by some religious groups and individuals. And some occult practices, sometimes they do involve risky or potentially harmful activities. But there is no scientific evidence to support the claims that the occult is evil as per se. I mean, it literally means hidden. That's all it means. Just like some of our body transmissions, right? And so throughout history, many occult practices have been misunderstood or misrepresented, leading to misconceptions and even persecution. And what I know as a history buff, as it were, is that some of those persecutions have been politically driven by whoever is in charge or in control at the time. So I'll give you an example. The term witchcraft has been used to describe a wide range of practices throughout history, but is often associated with the persecution of, one, women specifically, accused of using magic to harm others. And in reality, many of those so-called witches were really just like herbalists, healers, midwives, who were targeted by religious authorities for practicing outside of the established religious tradition. And so what that says to me is that somebody will malign, or a group, an institution, et cetera, will malign a certain set of practices because, one, they don't understand it, and two, they can't control it. Right? So I want you to think back to like way back, thousands of years, thousands, I'm talking like 6, 7, 10, 15, 20,000 years of human history. Now, you know what happens biologically. Every single month, if you're a healthy woman, you bleed, but you don't die. But when a man bleeds, yeah, he's wounded. And if he bleeds as long as you bleed, 5, 7 days, nonstop, yeah, I'm close to death. How are you doing this? How are you doing this every single month and not dying? You must be a witch. Must be. Because I don't understand this. And if you have more power than me, I'm going to have to do something so that you don't come to harm me about it. Do you see what I mean about like how these misconceptions get started, right? And so it's the same thing with, for example, intuition. How can you prophesy like this? How do you know, right? That in 6 months, for example, there's going to be this lunar eclipse or this solar eclipse, and this energy is going to change. And how do you know that? You must be in bed with the devil, because I don't understand it and I can't control it. Right? In some ancient cultures, women were, there was a phrase called swallowing the moon, right? And it's a double entendre because women's cycles are regulated by the moon. It is called the lunar cycle, right? And however, when a woman would get pregnant, she would no longer have a lunar cycle, but her belly would grow. So it was almost like she swallowed the moon because there it is in her belly, right? And so how is it, again, I'm asking you to think, not with the knowledge that you have now about biological processes, but imagine 25,000 years, 50,000 years ago, when we did not have that knowledge, or we were just trying to figure things out. How is it that you can pop out a human being, an entire human being? See, back then people didn't even know that the way that this happened was you had sexual relations, a man deposited some substance inside of the woman, and then that matched with her substance inside of the woman. And 9 months later, after she swallowed the moon, out came a perfectly, both arms, both legs, both, head, nostrils, eyes, etc., perfectly formed human being. How did she do that? And because we did not have the medical necessarily or scientific knowledge that we have now, some women died in childbirth. I mean, women still die in childbirth. But what happens with that is that, listen, once I realize that the reason why I'm putting my life at risk is because I'm laying down with you, guess what I'm no longer going to do? I'm no longer laying down with you. Or I'm going to discover some plants and some herbs or whatever that will preserve my life. I'm not trying to kill anything. I'm trying to preserve my life. Right? Oh, well, then how will we know that this is my heir? How will I pass on my accumulated wealth? I have to bring your sexuality and your reproductive rights under control so that I can, et cetera, right? And so this is how we vilify certain things for religious, tradition, economic, financial, or social reasons. I want to take the stigma out of something being called evil or being misrepresented as bad. I want you to understand where that comes from so that you can make a decision about whether you feel, whether you deem something to be wrong or bad or evil, et cetera, given that you know its historical context. Another example of occult practices that have been misunderstood or misrepresented is alchemy. Alchemy is often thought of as an early form of chemistry, but it also has a mystical or a spiritual component. And alchemists believed that they could transmute base metals, for example, into gold, something meaningless or perhaps that didn't have as much value, such as lead or copper or whatever, into something that did have value, such as gold. But metaphysically, this is also a tale, a fable, a symbology of sorts. Because spiritually, that's also what happened. You're transforming this human base experience into spiritual enlightenment. Right? Tarot cards, another one, often associated with fortune telling or divination, but they were originally used as playing cards in Italy during the 15th century. And it wasn't until the 18th century that tarot cards began to be used for divination. And even then, their symbolism was highly personal and varied from reader to reader. Same goes for astrology. The study of the movement and relative positions of celestial objects as a means of divination. And while some people, many people still today, use astrology to gain insights into personality and relationships and collective movement, it was once seen as a science on par with astronomy. And then as time has gone on, and as people realize that in order for me to maintain control of a group of people, I'm going to have to vilify the ways in which they govern themselves, astrology fell out of favor as a legitimate means of understanding the world. So those are some of the examples of occult practices that have been misinterpreted or misrepresented over time. And it's important to approach any occult practice with an open mind and a healthy dose of skepticism, I suppose, to separate fact from fiction when it comes to their origins, their beliefs, their historical context, and so forth. And so I, you know how I do, I talk a little bit and then I'm like, what do you think? I bring something to you and I'm like, let's discuss, let's massage this together. Where are you in terms of like your thought of something being occult and its relationship to evil or inappropriateness? Where are you with that? Let me take your temperature first before we start diving all the way deeper.
Can I ask a question before I answer your
Yes.
question? Is if you like take a step back, if you would, because I've never really thought about the difference between occult practices and occult. And
Mhm.
so what do you think is like the common understanding of what occult is today? And then that can help to answer the question. Because you've kind of like dispelled myths, and I didn't have the intel to know what those myths are.
Mhm. Wait, so you're asking me what's the connection between the occult and occult?
Well, not necessarily now, I think I understand, but what is the general perception of what occult means?
Occult is a spiritual or religious sect, basically.
Okay.
But just like occult has its negative implications, so does occult, right? That it's bad, that it's leading people the wrong way, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. All right. Let me think on your question.
Yes. So to give you an example of occult, Prince fans, we're a cultish bunch. Right? That's an example without the implication. Yeah. Who else has something? Where are you with it? Do you also subscribe to the implication that occult means bad or evil or inappropriate? Or are you kind of like, no, occult I know what the heck it means. I know the etymology just means hidden. That's all it means. Yes, Cece.
I kind of like this subject. Actually, growing up, I learned about a lot of cultish things because my parents were very cultish. They had superstitions, all kind of stuff that they picked up along the way because we lived in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the hat on the bed is superstitious. I don't believe in that. My parents did.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between occult and cultish behaviors was distinguished for me early in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to be quote unquote in a quote unquote cult, religious sect, people doing just because it was a group. And of course, I did not want to judge anyone because that's their business. Because, I lived in England and I met with, I learned about the witches in England by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So I just look at it as everyone has a view. Everyone has a choice as to what they want to do in life. And if it works for them, I'm okay with it. I'm not going to use my personal energy to judge them or change my mind or love towards people because of their way of thinking or how they learn things.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand from a different area now that I have my own relationship. How did I learn it? I learned it from trial and error. Some of it I studied, and some of it I just experienced personally. So I can identify with the occultish group, and I can understand the phenomenon, the supernatural, mystical side of it, and magical beliefs and all the other phenomenon. But I do not knowingly practice it. I'm sure I probably have some ideologies that I've had to undo that I learned from my, family. So I'm okay with learning something new. So I pass, and thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You said something really important there at the end, and that is that this is something that I learned from my family. And 90% of the time, I don't know what the exact number is, but I'm going to assert 90% of the time, we typically ascribe to a particular set of beliefs because we were raised with those beliefs, not because they're accurate. And so when you can expose yourself to different beliefs and different philosophies, and then from there, from that buffet, as it were, choose the one that resonates the most with you, then you can say, these are my beliefs. right? But if you haven't gone through that level of audit, if you haven't gone through that level of self-examination, you can't really say these are my beliefs. What are you comparing it to? How do you know those are your beliefs in the absence of, right? And so one of the ways in which we sometimes ascribe negative or pejorative qualities to something is because, one, we don't understand it, we haven't been exposed to it, we don't understand the context of it, the historicity of it, etc. Even sometimes the racial or the geographical or the historical components of something, right? So to give you an example, from just linguistics, let's stay away from the spiritual for a second, and then let's just go to something that all humans do, which is to communicate via the spoken language. Here in the United States of America, there were, as you know, people were kidnapped and killed and brought over through the ocean to be enslaved here. And they came from different tribes, different languages, different regions of the world, etc. And then to be thrown together like this, one of the basic needs of humanity is to create community. How do you create community with somebody that has different spiritual, cultural, family traditions, etc., and a different language? You kind of have to create a third thing, right? There's my language, your language, and then there's the thing that we co-create together. So that has translated throughout the centuries in the United States of America to different dialects that the African American culture has. So there are people that speak Tanese, there are people that speak Gullah Geechee, there are people that speak AAVE, African American Vernacular English. When you don't understand it, you think it's ghetto. You think it's inappropriate English. But if you go back a couple of centuries, this was a methodology for survival. And just because you don't know that history doesn't mean that it's inappropriate. See, and so a lot of times this is what we do with spiritual traditions and spiritual practices, is because you haven't been exposed, because you don't understand it, you think it's bad. Make sense what I'm saying? Shiva, welcome. I see your hand raised.
Hi, thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you for your willingness. I'm going to say also your bravery to speak on this topic. When you talk about the occult, it's like I grew up hearing about these terms, and I went in my own life, went through so many journeys and processes of, I feel like, and I'm going to say as women, I know for myself, I always sensed like something was off about the narrative. I didn't know the language for it, but I had this sense like, this doesn't feel right, that, just something that happens to me every month menstruating is so bad and evil and all these things, And what I am just, even present to right now is just like I literally have been in research about this for the past few months, because I was writing a paper, which I just turned in. And so, but now to hear you, pull back so many different layers around this topic, and you talked about the moon and the occult practices and what it actually is versus what we've been taught. I wanted to just tell you thank you, really, because there's not a lot of people really, I'm going to say two things: brave enough, but also who has the language and the ability to skillfully and tactfully bring it to the discussion. So I just thank you so much. And I was like, I logged on and I was like, wait, what? This woman is speaking to my heart.
See,
what is happening?
Look at what you've been missing, girl. I haven't seen you in a month of Sundays.
I know, and I wasn't going to even get on. I was in the process, moving, and I was like, okay, just pause, just get on. And I'm so glad that I did. So just thank you for bringing it up for discussion, because it's truly needed and necessary.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Shiva, and welcome back to your forever Daily Huddle family. I wanted to start the discussion with the evidence that we already participate in occult practices. Because then it's not so like, it's not so ghoulish. It's not so inappropriate. It's something you're already doing. And that's actually a great strategy for you whenever you are facing something uncomfortable or unfamiliar. Look for evidence where you have already not only started practicing this, but maybe even become successful at it, right? In my coaching practice, for example, when we're about to start something new, somebody that has never done Facebook ads, for example, when I do business coaching, or that has never had a grace talk and they don't understand the idea of airing out a grievance. You've already done that. I'm not presenting something new. I'm just organizing it in a different framework so that it's easily more digestible. But this is not new information, right? And so when you can soothe your nervous system with that, we've already done this. We're just organizing the data differently. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm not a threat. I'm not feeling threatened here. Ronald, you got something?
Yeah, I just want to say that only Daily Huddle you can listen to the analogy of women bleeding and a man bleeding is two different worlds,
Right.
and I was like, wait a minute, I never thought about it this way, but only in Daily Huddle you can see this two contrasts there and see the power, understand the power of women. And to say that witchcraft is associated with women, it's like I think it's kind of been a survival way, and again, power to the women that really it's the woman is at the stem of life. So I just wanted to add that to this conversation. But yes, it's a very amazing analogy to tell if a man bleeds 7 days, he will die, and if a woman's bleeding 7 days, and then that.
It's just my period.
Yes, that's all I had to say.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Rashida.
Good morning, my family daily huddle. This is Rashida Panpie, and it's Dr. Ogando. Every time you come on Thursday, I am so attentive to hear your topic. And this topic brought me back to my grandparents. My grandparents. And why I say this is because in both of my grandparents by father's side, they was Indian. But two different tribes. My grandmother was from one tribe and my grandfather was from other tribe. And when they do fire ritual, it was two different fire ritual. And I remember good when they started instill some of the culture and the little cooking. And people used to be like, "Oh, your grandparents, them is they are witches and they are witches." And trust me, at this point where I'm at today, I remember 3 years ago I did ayahuasca, and the shaman said, "You know, you're a little witch." And he said that because I remember hearing people call my grandparents them witches. I said, "Oh, I have to be a witch then because my grandfather was witch." But the witch, what we emphasize now in today's world is not the same thing that they was instilling in us, but the knowledge that they pass on to us.
Yes.
Trust me. So very important topic, well taken. And I'm going to go back into my notes that my ancestors them are left with me. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And isn't it amazing? There are some things that our ancestors, that our elders pour into us. And when you're 5, 6, 7, maybe even 15, 16, 17, you don't know and you don't care. And then when you get old enough, mature enough, grown enough, then it's like, oh, wow, it's already in my tool bag. I already have this. I already have this tool. I already have this access. I already have this you know, kind of like foundational knowledge, etc. And then the gratitude comes. It's like, man, how did they know I was going to need this? Right? Because listen, it takes 40 years to be a 40-year-old. There's no shortcutting that, right? But as a mentor of mine once said, just because this is the oldest you've ever been doesn't mean you're grown, right? How many of us know 70-something-year-old children and 5-year-old elders, you know? So the chronology of time isn't necessarily where the wisdom lies. It's in our accumulation and application of the wisdom and the tools that our people give us. So thank you everybody for being here and engaging in this juicy, juicy, juicy conversation. Go on and keep doing your occult practices. Please, no fat flatulence in public. Continue having that being an occult practice, please, for the rest of us, right? As always, love generously, give of yourself, sleep at least 7 hours, move your body. It doesn't have to be necessarily hard work. It could really just be a dance. Yeah, like Andrea right now, right? See, just flowing, being in your body, earthing, right? Also, make sure that you eat more plant-based and stress less. And of course, as always, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Audit your assumptions. Thank you for being here with us at the Daily Huddle. See you next time.
Beautiful day for all.
One
Bye.
love.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.